Will cricket ever break America? And does it need to?
Define break.
Will it ever be able to support itself?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I think Americans actually, I reckon about 12, 14 years ago, I started seeing comments from Americans who weren't expats. And once they kind of get into cricket, they realize there's so much minutiae and nonsense to get in touch with. They really like that. American fans are like far more, I think we see them as this like, Donald Trump voting, reality TV people. But you look at their sports fans are mega nerds and really get into the weeds. Like, watch the NFL coverage or NBA coverage and all this, and you see that. And they love that side of cricket. So I think there's a big part of that will work. The market is there. There's enough people there. They got into football. They got into rugby. They're getting into other sports as we go through. Will it ever be a top 10 sport? Maybe not, but it only needs to be a top 15 sport probably to sustain itself over there. The real issue is the team has to be good, I think, from an American point of view. And the only way for the team to be good is for cricket to be played in college sports. That's where they make all their athletes, right? And at the moment, cricket is not in college sports. So you get plenty of people will tell me in America, there are good young cricketers coming through, men and women, 16, 17, 18. But when they get to college, they pick up another sport because they have a chance of getting a scholarship and going to a university if they're athletically inclined. And so this whole generation of cricketers keeps getting lost. You can find a way to fix that. Anything could happen with cricket, but realistically, it can sustain itself, I think. There's enough people over there and there's enough interest over there. It just needs to be run about 1,000 times better than it currently is.
How important is the Olympics in and amongst this?
Yeah, I think they're going to have a World Cup, Major League Cricket, and the Olympics, right? Like those are three big things within the space of 3 or 4 years. That should be a really, really important thing. But I do think if you go back to football, I don't know how much you follow American politics, but there was a whole voting block in America at one stage, and all the politicians talked about it, of the Volvo driving soccer moms, right? Football got big in the US by kids playing it at the lower level, and then eventually it got to the professional levels and the college levels and everything else. There has to be a movement within cricket. The way to do that, though, of course, is signing Pelé whenever they signed Pelé, hosting the 1994 World Cup, those sorts of things. So you need the two to go hand in hand, and I think that can happen. So I think the Olympics, the World Cup, Major League Cricket, all these things are really, really helpful. But, it's a weird World Cup that they're hosting at the moment, if we're being honest.
And your initial thoughts of the World Cup so far?
I think the pitch in New York is as bad a pitch as I've seen for a World Cup surface since 1992 when Australia played in all those regional grounds. It's not fit for international cricket. It shouldn't have, the Sri Lanka South Africa game shouldn't have gone ahead. I would have probably, if I was an umpire, I would have said this is not an international standard wicket. We shouldn't be playing this game anymore. It actually got worse, that wicket. South Africa somehow won that game. And the outfield was arguably, John, worse than the pitch. And we have to, it's a World Cup. We have to have certain standards, right? But other side of it, the Dallas wicket, I think, has been really, really good. I don't know if you saw Aaron Jones in the first game whacking sixes everywhere. Dallas wicket looks fine, but they played a lot of cricket in Dallas. They decided to have a World Cup in New York, and 5 months ago started worrying about a pitch. Of course they're going to have issues with the wicket.
What's the difference? I mean, I'm not sure how many drop-in pitches you played on, but certainly it's the way of the world in some parts of the world. I mean, what's the difference when you're a batter and you're playing on a pitch that you can't trust, essentially?
I'm going to say, I've never played on one, but when I was coach, there were drop-in pitches, and they're the norm in New Zealand. I mean, you get some really good drop-in pitches, but they've got characteristics, and they tend to be quite benign. They're quite slow. They don't really induce top batting, if you like. They've not got the pace.
They quite often have that tennis ball bounce a little bit, don't they?
And so, you can think about pitches that after dropping pitches usually start with a tinge of green and a bit of moisture, because the moisture is going to come out of it very, very quickly. It's only about that deep. And so if you've mastered it in New Zealand and to a certain extent in Australia, they're absolutely fine. You compromise, and that's what we've got, a drop-in pitch. But it's one of those, what could possibly go wrong in New York when they're transporting a pitch from Adelaide? I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Because once it's in, it's in.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm listening to Jared saying about this match, Sri Lanka and South Africa. Can they actually rectify it? Is there just one drop in, or have they brought 2, 3, 4? Is it just the one?
No, I think they've got a few. So they played a warm-up game, India-Bangladesh, and India made 180. So that wicket must be slightly better.
No,
Having
that's
said
fine.
that, but then Bangladesh went out to bat, and everyone said that the wicket really deteriorated in the second half again. So we're hoping there are better squares than the one that we've seen so far. You can't have a bad pitch for India-Pakistan, and I don't mean a bad pitch of 120 plays 120, right? We're okay with that. That's a good, entertaining game. We're talking about a pitch where international batters can't play because they don't trust the ball coming on.
How hot is it in New York? Is it very, very hot? I don't know.
It's quite hot at the moment, I suppose. I mean, it's the start of summer.
Saps, you've got to get some moisture into it, because the heat just saps it out very, very quickly. So they've half a chance in New York if they got 2 or 3 pitches, and after that game, I assume they've said that this doesn't work. We've got to do something with this pitch.
Well, surely let's at least hope they don't use that pitch again, or something happens to it in between.
So what's the match referee say about it? What do the governing body say about that pitch?
Well, I think the funniest question is, can the ICC fine themselves for a bad pitch? And where does that money go if they do fine themselves? I mean, it's their fault.
Were you coach of England in Sabina Park?
Yes.
98?
Yeah.
So what's it like when you're too scared to come forward because you don't trust the bounce because the ball's going to rear up at?
Well,
as an opening bat, coming up against a Tomo, or watching your players out there, what's that like?
You have no plan. You've no game plan. You know, at international level, when you know your opening batters go out, you've got a game plan. You've watched the guy, the mechanics of the action. You've watched him in a bit of practice. You've got a good thought and a good idea of what you're trying to do. That goes out the window. If once it bounces, you've no clue whether it's going to roll on the floor or go over your head. I mean, it's just a complete lottery, as that game was. And the warning signs in Sabina Park were at the practice pitches. And the funniest thing, which is, you know, you're netting all round. In the Wisdom, they dipped all the nets in oil. And so these were wet through with oil. So the ball would go into the side net and come back dripping with oil, which then hits the bat. The bat is full of oil. And so you couldn't hold the ball, and you had to keep wiping the bat. The warning signs were there before the game started. And then when you know when they put the line across the string to line it all up, the pitch itself, you saw this string was touching the surface, missing the surface, touching the surface, and you thought, how's it going to play? And then you find out after 60-odd balls, match abandoned, off to Trinidad.
And like with that, we've all played on club wickets like that. But you have to understand that when you're facing 80 mile an hour,
There's a big
85 mile an hour,
difference.
it's not the same. If you and I had played on that wicket that Sri Lanka and South Africa played on, we would have been like, well, that wasn't great. But, you know, the bowlers wouldn't have been that fast to be able to cause us any issues.
Yeah.
Anrich Nortje was bowling on this, and finally he got his fitness back. The Sri Lankans must have been like, couldn't you just be unfit for one more game? Couldn't you bowl like you did in the IPL? He's bowling at 93 miles an hour into the wicket, and one ball is shooting up past your ear ball at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and the next one is popping over because of this weird bounce, and the third one's keeping low. I mean, what are you supposed to do against that, right? Like, I honestly think that game should have been abandoned after about 6 overs. I think the umpires should have just said, this is wrong. This doesn't make sense.
So, talking pitches, I worked on a Lancashire versus Durham T20. What a pitch at Emirates Old Trafford. The best pitch I've seen in years. Quick, flat, if you know what I mean, flat, uniform bounce.
Yep.
And it was flying through to the keeper. At this time of year, after all the weather that we've had, and I said to Matt Merchant, how enthusing, he's a groundsman. I said, what a pitch, Matt, how did you get it like that? He said, I wish I knew. And so they played on it again and again, and it all went out, all the pace went out, and it became quite a flat pitch after 3 or 4 matches. It was a good pitch.
On AM, on DAB, via the TalkSport app and on your smart speaker. TalkSport.